Welcome to this course on sex, porn, and masturbation addiction. My name is Denise, and I'll be your course facilitator. I have an education that specializes in addiction and recovery, and I also have many years of experience working in the addiction field. This course specifically will dig into the topics of sex addiction, porn addiction, and masturbation addiction. If you struggle with just one of those addictions, this is the course for you. If you struggle with all three, this course is also for you. So not only are we going to be going into the specifics of sex addiction, porn addiction, and masturbation addiction, but we're also going to be covering topics such as physical health, your psychological health, and your social circles, as this program uses a holistic approach so that you can achieve a full recovery from your addiction. In this course, you will be given all of the tools that you will need to achieve a full recovery from your sex addiction, porn addiction, or masturbation addiction. So we're going to start in our next lecture. I'm going to give you a brief rundown of everything that this course will cover. See you there.
Hey everyone, welcome to our next lecture. In this lecture, I'm going to give you a brief outline on what you can expect in this course. Before we start with that, I want to talk to you about something that you all might be wondering. What makes me qualified to teach a sex, porn, and masturbation addiction course? Well, for starters, I have an education that focuses on addiction. I have an associate's degree in chemical dependency, a bachelor's degree in counseling with an emphasis on chemical dependency, substance abuse, and addiction, and a master's degree in psychology. When I was working in an outpatient treatment center, we would have clients who struggled with multiple addictions. Many of them would struggle with porn addiction. During my one-on-one sessions, we would talk about porn addiction, sex addiction, masturbation addiction, but most of my clients were not comfortable talking about it during group sessions. I started to dig a little deeper into why they were feeling such fear, and most of the time it stemmed from shame and embarrassment. I found it fascinating that my clients were okay sharing about their struggles with alcohol or other substances, but when it came to behavior addictions like porn, masturbation, or sex, it was a no-go. My clients felt judged and less than. They told me they felt like other people would look at them and be like, so you're over there addicted to masturbation while I'm struggling with a heroin addiction, and then they would scoff at them. Like, no matter how comfortable I tried to make the group sessions, my clients would not budge. So I started asking questions about what they felt they needed in order to succeed. What kind of support would be best? And the answers varied from being able to stay anonymous to interacting with others who had similar struggles. When I started my business, which offers people who struggle with addiction a way to get support from home in an online setting, I knew it was going to be important to have a course that focuses just on porn addiction. Little did I know that would be my most successful course. And while porn addiction is and always will be an addiction that people struggle with, it became clear that sometimes the addiction is more than just being addicted to porn. Some people struggle with porn addiction, sex addiction, or masturbation addiction. There are clear differences between the three, but it's clear that there are common links between them. So you may be someone who struggles with just porn, sex, or masturbation addiction, or someone who struggles with two of the three. For example, you could have a sex and porn addiction, or a porn and masturbation addiction, or a sex and masturbation addiction, or you can have all three. Like everything related to addiction, there is a spectrum, and your addiction is going to be unique to you. So let's talk about what we're going to cover in this course. In this section, which is the one that we're in right now, we're going to talk about the difference between sex, porn, and masturbation addiction. And we're going to talk about what's actually going on inside your brain. In section 2, we'll talk about the specifics of sex addiction, porn addiction, and masturbation addiction. So we're going to have an entire lecture that is dedicated to just one of those three addictions. Then in section 3, we're going to talk about the emotional toll of having an addiction, co-occurring disorders, finding the root cause, your childhood, and emotional barriers. And in section 4, that's when we're going to dig into the Sobriety Success Method. Now, the Sobriety Success Method comprises of your physical health, which is nutrition, fitness, and sleep, your psychological health, which is your mental health, your worldview, and living intentionally, your social health, which is family, friends, and professional relationships. And then we're going to get into addiction-specific topics such as setting a quit date, how to take inventory, and we'll talk about triggers. And in the section 5, in the last section, we're going to talk about taking action, the first 30 days, and long-term recovery. So documenting your journey is going to be very important, a very important part of this course. There are 2 ways that you can do this. You can write in your journal, or you can answer the questions after each lecture. It doesn't matter which one you choose as long as you make sure that you do it. It's a very important part of this course. This course isn't just about kicking an addiction. It's a complete lifestyle change. So that's what we'll cover. Let's get started now, and in our next lecture, we're going to talk about the 3 addictions in detail so that you can get a better understanding of where on the spectrum you may fall. I'll see you there. Hey everyone, welcome back. So we know that oftentimes sex, porn, and masturbation addiction can be lumped together, but there are distinct differences between the 3. It's important that you understand the difference so that you know what steps to take to be able to kick your addiction or addictions. So let's first talk about masturbation addiction. Masturbation addiction is being addicted to masturbating. We all know that as teens go through puberty, their sex drive is through the roof. But even with that being said, most people as young as masturbation starts can exhibit self-control. But what happens when the drive to masturbate becomes so much that you literally cannot control it? Well, that could be a problem. Let's be clear though, masturbation is normal, and when people masturbate in their own privacy and it doesn't affect their mental health, cause one to neglect their personal or professional relationships, and doesn't affect anyone else, it's generally deemed as an okay thing to do, barring any religious beliefs. However, if you are choosing to masturbate rather than doing normal activities like hanging out with your friends, family, enjoying your hobbies, and so on, then it's time to take a deeper look into the situation. Other signs to look out for is if you're masturbating in places you know deep down are concerning, like anywhere in public or like running off to the restroom during a party and so on. And last, if it's affecting your mental health, you should take it seriously. For example, if you're feeling sad or guilty after you masturbate, masturbation to cope with negative emotions, or if it's an obsessive compulsive thought, then there's a problem. So next we're going to talk about sex addiction. Sex addiction is a bit different in that it's the obsession with having sexual intercourse with another person. But like masturbation addiction, there are certain signs to look out for, such as whether or not it's affecting your personal, professional relationships, whether your thoughts are obsessive or compulsive, and so on. Like masturbation addiction, when you have an addiction to sex, it's something that's always on your mind, but the act itself is quite different and always involves another person. So if you are thinking about it and also acting on it, then that's a cause for concern. The bigger issues, though, with sex addiction is that there's a higher chance of hurting someone else, especially if you have the inability to stop the urges. It's like being addicted to heroin and robbing someone for their stash. Nobody goes into the addiction with the intent to hurt others. The compulsion and obsession can often be too much to handle. People who suffer from sex addiction want to have sex often, sometimes multiple times per day. And because it's not always possible to find a partner who shares the same desire, those with sex addiction often have multiple partners or pay for sex. Those with sex addiction may also experience sexual fantasies with the obsessive thoughts of wanting to act on those fantasies. And like masturbation addiction, there are maybe the feeling of guilt or remorse after the sexual act is performed. Now let's talk about porn addiction. Porn addiction is the addiction to watching pornography, whether or not masturbation or sex is included. Pornography addiction is very common. Those who suffer from porn addiction may spend hours and hours watching porn. Like sex and masturbation addiction, if porn is interfering with your personal or professional life, then it's a problem. If you masturbate to porn, does that mean you have both a masturbation and porn addiction? Not necessarily. I've had a lot of students in my porn class think that they have a masturbation addiction, and it turns out that they actually don't. If a person can only masturbate to porn, then it's likely a porn addiction. You would just have to ask yourself, if I didn't have porn, would I be able to get an erection, masturbate, and ejaculate or reach a climax without thinking or watching porn? If the answer is yes, then perhaps it's masturbation addiction and not a porn addiction. You see, these are 2 very different addictions, and the way to kick these addictions can be quite different. Porn addiction is the addiction to watching porn and only being able to masturbate and reach a climax to those images. Masturbation addiction is the compulsion to masturbate anytime, anywhere, which may or may not include watching porn. So, can you have more than one? Yes, you can have all three. So, let's talk about that. For example, someone who struggles with both sex and masturbation addiction may suffer from one on a larger scale than the other. If someone is addicted to sex, their first choice would be to have sexual intercourse with another person. But what if there was no other person to have sex with at a specific time? Someone who is addicted to just sex would have no choice but to move on or continue to search for someone to have sex with and would generally not masturbate. But if someone was addicted to both sex and masturbation addiction, they may search for sex first, and if that wasn't an option, they would masturbate. For those who are addicted to all three, there's generally a scale, meaning first choice, second choice, and third choice. If one of the three, sex, porn, or masturbation, doesn't enter your mind regularly, and you don't act on those when you can't partake in another one, then you probably aren't addicted to that one. So what I want you to be able to do now is to be real with yourself and take some time to think about what addiction it is that you struggle with. Again, it can be one, two, or all three. If it's more than one, which one is your more dominant addiction? The reason that this is important is so that you can progress through the course and know what to focus on and what not to waste your time with. For example, if you struggle with porn and sex addiction, you don't really need to know how to stop a masturbation addiction. But what is important is if you struggle with more than one, that you focus on both of them equally throughout the course. You don't want to focus on kicking one addiction, but still having another addiction. It's not going to help you in the long run. The goal of this course is for you to be able to train your brain to go back to its baseline, meaning where it was before your addiction started, so that you can have a happy, healthy life and relationships and feel good about yourself. Okay, so that's all for this lecture. I'll see you in the next one. Hello and welcome to our next lecture. In this section, I'm going to talk about what is going on inside your brain so that you can fully understand how a behavior addiction works and what's causing your brain and body to act and feel a certain way. There is a chemical in your brain called dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, which means it sends signals from one cell to another. When a person engages in a behavior that is followed by a reward, it activates the dopamine pathway. The purpose of this pathway is to remember the reward-motivated behavior. When there is pleasure involved, your brain remembers this, and each time you come upon a situation where the dopamine pathway was activated, your brain will release more dopamine before you engage in that behavior. So, for example, the first time you masturbate, view porn, or have sex, you don't know beforehand whether or not it's going to feel good. Once you start engaging in the behavior, it feels good, so the dopamine pathway is opened up and starts sending pleasure signals from one cell to another. Fast forward to the next time. Before you even engage in the activity, you start thinking about the activity itself. The brain has remembered this reward-motivated behavior, so the dopamine pathway has already opened up, sending pleasure signals from one cell to another. Before you know it, certain things will trigger the release of a dopamine without you having to even think about it, which then forces you to think about it, and that's when the dopamine pathway is opened up again, and that is called a trigger. The problem with all of this is that if you start to chronically engage in an activity, your brain is constantly flooded with dopamine, and in order to regulate, the dopamine receptors get smaller. When your brain has too little dopamine, then it feels demotivated, and this is where you may start to feel sad, lonely, depressed, or unmotivated. The only way to get out of that feeling is to get more dopamine to the brain so you engage more in that activity. If you're feeling this way, it's not your fault. Like any addiction, it's not a matter of self-control, and you can now see that there is science backing the fact that an addiction is a brain disease. The brain is what is called plasticity, which means it can change based upon your environment and the information that you take in. That is good news because you can literally change your brain by not engaging in the activity. So you may have wondered when you purchased this course why I touch on subjects that seem unrelated to sex, porn, or masturbation addiction. The purpose of this course is to train your brain so that you can feel pleasure from other sources. And the way to do that is to be action focused and give your brain time to heal. That's it for this section. We've talked about the difference between the 3 addictions and how you can have 1, 2, or all 3 at the same time. We also talked about what's going on inside your brain. So this concludes our first section, and we have a lot more to cover. We're just getting started. I'll see you in our next section where we're going to talk about sex, porn, and masturbation addiction in more detail. I'll see you there. Welcome to our next section. In this section, we're going to cover sex, porn, and masturbation addictions in detail. Even if you think you don't have a problem with one of them, it's important to watch the lectures so that you can get a better understanding of how these 3 addictions can intertwine and what to look for in the future. So first up, we're going to talk about sex addiction. See you there. When it comes to sex addiction, there's typically a cycle that occurs, and it looks like this: compulsive thoughts, acting out, regret, feeling numb, feeling triggered, and then acting out again, and it repeats. Like with any addiction, acting out on thoughts, in this case having sex, releases dopamine, which is the chemical in your brain that makes you feel good. Yes, that happens to most people when they have sex, but the difference is that there's a compulsion to always have that feeling. So it's like how some people can drink a glass of wine and not be an alcoholic. It's not a character flaw. It's not something you did or you didn't do. It's not willpower. It's just how your brain is. And the way to get around it is by changing the way your brain thinks about sex. Overcoming sex addiction isn't just about stopping sex. There's so much more that goes into it, and that's what this course is about. Not only are you going to focus on changing the way you think about sex, but you are also going to have to focus on the other areas of your life. Figuring out how you got to this place to begin with, taking care of your physical and mental health, and also retraining your brain so that you can have healthy relationships that don't revolve around sex. So while you are progressing through this course, I want you to think about how you can start retraining your brain about how you think about sex and why changing your behavior is going to be important. The first thing you can do in your journal is answer these questions. The first question is, what are the disadvantages of my behavior? For example, takes up too much time, unhealthy relationships, costs too much money, whatever that is for you. The next question is, what are the benefits to me changing my behavior? For example, maybe increased productivity, more motivation, and so on. And then the third question is, what are the disadvantages to me continuing my behavior? For example, I continue to feel bad about myself. So the way that we talk about internal dialogue, the stories we tell ourselves really shape our thoughts, feelings, and actions. Now is the time to dig deep into your mind, and anytime you have a thought about sex, do your best to refocus that thought. Not necessarily ignoring it, but rephrasing is a way to retrain your brain. For example, you might currently say to yourself, I have a high sex drive and having sex is what I do. So instead, start to retrain that thought pattern. You could say something like, my old pattern was dangerous and it's an old habit. I don't have to do that. I'm learning to have healthier sexual relationships and rebuild the quality relationships that I care about. Some people say things like, I'm a scumbag and the only way I'm satisfied is if I can get people to do what I want. You can retrain your brain to say something like, it's not my fault my brain was wired like this. I am strong because I am now taking the steps needed to improve my life. Maybe you might be saying, well, who will have sex with me? Or who here will have sex with me? Like if you're in a room and you're just looking around at everybody, to I'm here for a purpose other than having sex, and so is everyone else. Okay, so as we progress through the course, you might be wondering what the end goal is. Like you might be wondering, will I ever have sex again? How often can I have sex? And so on. So at first, we're going to aim for 30 days of abstinence. And we'll talk about that a little later in this course when we talk about the first 30 days. But after that, it will fully depend on what type of relationship you are in. If you are in a committed relationship, then having sex with your spouse or your partner is a normal way to proceed, but it will look a lot different. When you're in a committed relationship, you must agree with your partner on how often you should have sex. And yes, there may be some compromise that needs to give. You may be thinking, great, I'll have sex once per day, whereas your partner may be saying, no, that's too much. Let's do it twice per week. Either way, you will need to have a conversation about it, agree, and be okay with setbacks and changes. For example, you and your partner may agree to have sex every Wednesday and Saturday, but if something comes up on Wednesday night, it's okay to reschedule or skip that day. When you are recovering from a sex addiction, this may feel very foreign, but that's really the end goal. Now, if you don't have a partner, the goal is going to be to learn how to be okay with not having sex and having a healthy masturbation routine. You have to ask yourself how many times per week is a healthy amount of time to masturbate. This should be something that you think about in advance. So after your 30 days of abstinence, you have a very specific plan to follow. On average, depending on your age and health, of course, a person masturbates 2 to 3 times per week. So maybe you start there, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. In my own private space, without the use of porn or anything online. So that's what you could say to yourself. The goal is to have a healthy relationship with masturbation. Some people find this harder to do, while others find it easier. If you are finding it hard to masturbate on your own, then the best thing that you can do is skip the session completely and wait until the next day. For example, if you plan to masturbate every Monday night, you put your phone and your computer away, and if you're male and you can't get erect, or if you're female and you can't get aroused, don't force it. Just give up and move on to something else like watching TV or even sleep, and then try again Wednesday night. This is you retraining your brain, and this is the process of getting your brain back to its baseline. Eventually, you'll be able to have a full orgasm that isn't dependent on a person, porn, or any sort of outside stimulation, but you have to be patient with yourself as you work through this. Okay, so that's it when it comes to sex addiction. In our next lecture, we're going to talk about porn addiction. So if you are addicted to porn, please make sure you watch that lecture as well. And, even if you're not addicted to porn, it's still a good idea to watch that lecture as well. Okay? I'll see you there. Pornography has been traced back to prehistoric times. Governments in parts of Europe and all of America made obscure images illegal in the mid-1800s. This means it was illegal to publish or sell porn. Like anything that is outlawed, people found a way to traffic images, and finally in the 1900s, it became illegal to view or possess pornographic images as well. When film started in the late 1800s and early 1900s, producers were excited to be part of a radical movement. It was very risky though, because if someone got caught, they would be prosecuted and jailed, but that didn't stop them. Porn in black and white in the early stages was nothing more than a striptease and rarely showed any close-ups of the penis or the vagina. In the mid-1900s, censorship began to overturn, and finally a major motion picture was released in 1969 in the genre of erotica. Erotic films were hard to come by and almost always had to have a special invite or members-only type of scenario. And finally in the 1970s, when VHS tapes started to become popular, so did pornos. You could find pornos at adult stores, but it's not as if there was one on every corner. If you've ever seen a 70s porn, you will see how vastly different it is compared to what you see today. VHS porns eventually turned into DVD porns, and it became easier and easier to obtain. Then came the World Wide Web. This is where everything changed. Today, you can buy porn from your TV or you can watch it on the internet. It takes no effort to obtain it, and you have access to it from your phone 24/7. With computer-generated images or CGI, a lot of what you see is not even real. With CGI, you can view porn in video games, and it's been known that there are films out there with fake children and celebrities. And unlike the porn from the early 1900s, none of what you see today paints a realistic picture of what real sexual intercourse and intimacy looks like. In today's industry, sexually transmitted infections are still very high. Sex trafficking and prostitution is also prevalent. Sex trafficking is big business. It generates $99 billion annually just from commercial sexual exploitation alone. And that is from the International Labor Organization. One activity I want you to do is to try to think back to the last time that you viewed porn and try to look at things through a different lens. Notice the lack of intimacy and how disconnected the two actors truly were. Now I want you to dig a little deeper into this topic. Porn stars are real people, and once you start to bring some empathy to the situation, you may be able to create some space around the thoughts you have while watching porn. The first thing I want you to do is think of your favorite porn star, male or female, and create an image of them in your head. Now think of them as they were a baby, wrapped up in a blanket in their mother's arms. When that mother looked into their brand new baby's eyes, she did not for one moment think they would grow up doing porn. Now think of what their childhood was like, good or bad, but just think of them as children. If you are picturing them as good children with a loving family, think about their innocence and their carefree playfulness. If your immediate thought was that they had a bad childhood and that's why they turned to porn, then think about that too. How terrible and awful it must have been for them to grow up like that. When you think of the best of childhoods and the worst of childhoods, the truth is that you'll find porn stars that come from all walks of life, some good and some not so good, but it's important to visualize what things may have been like for them. At some point, though, they made the decision to have sex with other people on television or on camera for a paycheck. Those same people have mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, nieces, nephews, grandparents, and some even have children of their own. Now, I want you to know that I'm not asking you to do this activity so that you can feel bad. Nobody here taking this course should feel shame or guilt, even though those are the most common feelings my students have. I want to remind you that none of this is your fault. The porn industry is worth billions of dollars, so they know how to trick people, how to make them want and need to continuously come back for more. It's like sales. They'll do whatever it takes to get your repeat business. Unfortunately for you, you now have to be smarter than them and be able to look at all this through a different lens. The porn industry is corrupt, to put it simply. Even with all the laws and the regulations put into place, there's still a very dark side that involves sex trafficking, sexually transmitted infections, and not to mention the mental and the emotional toll it takes on both men and women. Men are forced to inject their penises with medications that help them stay erect, and women are forced to turn their pain into something that looks like pleasure. Those who are addicted to porn often report that they only get an erection and achieve ejaculation if they are viewing porn, so it definitely affects relationships. Erectile dysfunction disorder and female dysfunction disorder are common. Rest assured, though, that when you quit porn, the brain has the amazing ability to return back to its baseline, so the physical and emotional struggles will start to fade over time. So that's it for this lecture. I'll see you in the next lecture when we'll talk about masturbation addiction. See you there. Welcome back. Some of you here may be struggling with a masturbation addiction, either as a primary addiction or secondary. Earlier, we talked about the difference and how it's important to treat your main addiction as well as any secondary addictions at the same time. So, masturbation addiction is more like a compulsion. Sometimes the addiction is so intense that you masturbate even without an erection or feeling aroused, and masturbation addiction can affect both males and females equally. If masturbation is an obsession, meaning you think about it all the time to the point that it's affecting your personal and professional life, then it's a problem, and you will need to work on changing the way that your brain thinks about masturbation. So, masturbation addiction is so unlike many other addictions like alcohol, smoking, substance use, food, sex, and even porn. Those addictions, you can physically separate yourself from the thing that is causing your addiction to make fighting the addiction easier. For example, with alcohol addiction, you can pour it all down the drain. With food, you can control what food comes in your home. And even with sex and porn, you can physically separate yourself from your computer or people. When it comes to masturbation addiction, though, that part of your body is always going to be with you wherever you go, which makes it that much more difficult to stop. So the first thing that you'll want to do, okay, is come up with a compromise, a number in your head of what you believe to be a healthy amount of time masturbating. For some, this may be 4 times a week. For others, it may be never. Okay, this is a very personal decision and one that is going to be different for everyone depending on your own values, your worldview, and even religion. If you are planning on masturbating at all in the future, again, this is a very personal decision. I want you to think of that, the number per week that you have in your head, okay? And you'll want to make a schedule for this when it would take place that doesn't interfere with your life. I'll go back to my example of 4 times per week. Let's say you chose 4 times a week. It might look like Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, okay? Once you figure out the days, then you'll want to figure out the time of day. For example, 5:30 p.m. after work, 10 p.m. while you're in bed, whatever time you choose that doesn't interfere with the other things that are going on in your life. And last, these sessions should be without the use of porn, because if you are addicted to porn, you might be trying to quit that as well. Okay? So to get this whole thing started, you're going to want to come up with a quit date. And you will go 30 days without masturbating at all. Okay? While you are going cold turkey, you will work through this program that takes a holistic approach. So we're going to focus on your physical health, your psychological health, and your relationships. Now, if you are in a relationship and still want to have sex and you do not have a sex addiction, that's perfectly okay. If you are having sex and cannot perform, which is common for those who suffer from masturbation addiction, then it's important to relax, take a step back, and try again another time. But do not resort to masturbating, as that will reset your 30-day clock. Okay? Once you are done with the 30 days and really working through this course, then you can start to implement your masturbation schedule if you have one. If you start to waver from the specific time you have set or increase the number of days, then you'll know that you're going back to old habits and will then either have to start again with 30 days, or if you catch it quick enough, make sure you go back to sticking to your schedule. Okay? So with all that being said, now it's time for you to start thinking about what you want your personal outcome to be. And as you're starting to think of that, continue to work through this course. Okay? So this is the plan. Write it down, put it in your journal, watch this lecture again. Okay? And I will see you in our next lecture. See you there. That's it for this section where we went into depth about sex, porn, and masturbation addictions and talked about how the approaches for each one will be different. Moving forward, as you work through this program, the remaining lectures will apply to all 3 of these addictions. So I'll see you in the next lecture in the next section when we talk about the emotional toll of having a behavior addiction. See you there. Welcome to our next section. This section is focused on the Sobriety Success Method. The Sobriety Success Method comprises of 4 areas: your physical health, your psychological health, your social health, and then specific addiction-focused topics. Each area is broken down into 3 categories. Physical health comprises of nutrition, fitness, and sleep. Psychological health comprises of your mental health, your worldview, and how to live with intention. Your social health consists of your family, friends, and professional relationships. And addiction focus is focusing on taking inventory, setting a quit day, and how to manage triggers. We're going to start with the addiction focus topics, and then we'll move into physical health, mental health, and social circles. See you in the next lecture. Welcome to our next lecture. In this lecture, we'll talk about how to take inventory. There are 3 categories when taking inventory: time, money, and relationships. So let's first talk about time, because when it comes to sex, porn, and masturbation, time is generally the most common thing that people sacrifice. So what I want you to do in your journal is keep track of your behaviors for 3 days. If you have quit already, then try to remember back to the last 3 days before you quit and keep track that way. Okay, I want you to keep track of all the time that you have spent on your addiction. Now, some people think it's just the time engaging in your specific behavior, like for example, time spent masturbating or time spent having sex or watching porn. But I want you to think even deeper. How much time did you spend before preparing for the behavior? How much time did you spend seeking out an opportunity? I'll give you some examples. If your addiction is sex, how much time each day did you stop what you were doing to think about or fantasize about having sex? How much time did you spend seeking out someone to have sex with? So add it all up. If your addiction is masturbation, how much time did you spend fantasizing about masturbating? For example, did you zone out in a work meeting dreaming of masturbating? Did you spend time online engaging in chat rooms or message boards? Add everything up each day. And for porn addiction, how much time did you spend each day watching porn or thinking about watching porn? So once you've kept track of 3 days worth of activity, add it all up and divide it by 3 to get a day's average. Once you have your 1-day average, you can times it by 7 to get your weekly average, or times it by 30 to get your monthly average. And when you have a monthly average, you can times it by 12 to get your yearly average, and so on. So all that time adds up. Okay? Once you've done the time activity, I want you to then focus on the money part of it. Now, this isn't just money that you spend on your addiction. It's also adding up money costs that's lost in productivity. So let's start with money spent, and then we'll move to money lost. For example, if you spend money on the internet in any way, add it up, whether it's chat rooms, webcams, porn sites, OnlyFans subscriptions, money spent on escorts, or sex, and so on. So again, add it all up in a way that you can find the average. So not necessarily just over 1 day, you'll need a week or a month's worth of data to get an accurate amount. But beyond money spent, also add up how much time you're losing in lost productivity. Have you taken time off work to engage in your behaviors? Have you been fired? Have you turned down a client, and so on? Think of the impact and make notes of all the lost income as well, if that applies to you. Okay, so, and then last, let's talk about relationships. I want you to take inventory of how many relationships you've sacrificed for your addictions. Start with intimate relationships and then also think about family and friends. For example, have you had a breakup due to too much or too little sex? Or have you ever been inappropriate with someone that's caused you to lose them? Maybe cheating, infidelity, and so on. Once you think about your intimate partners, then think about your friends and family members you may have lost. For example, I had a client who was addicted to porn, and he accidentally left a porn site up on his computer. When his 6-year-old niece came to visit, she wanted to play games on his computer. He didn't realize this, and she was exposed to the pornography. He did not tell his sister out of embarrassment, but the child ended up telling his sister a few days later, which caused a big fallout between them, and now he's no longer able to see his niece. Now, I want you to remember that this is an exercise for you to understand your addiction and what it's costing you, but not an exercise to bring you shame. And in fact, it should be the opposite. It's going to take a lot of strength and courage to work through this activity so that you can see your addiction for what it is. So be proud of that strength and courage that you have. Once you have all this information, I want you to start thinking about what life will be like when you have more time, more money, and you have repaired or accepted those relationships, because that's what's going to happen. Your life is going to get better after this, and this is the only way for you to know where you stand and how deep you are in this. While you're working on taking inventory, you can also be thinking about when you want your quit date to be, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next lecture. I'll see you there. Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to talk about setting a quit date. Setting a quit day is a very important part of this program. Most people randomly decide they want to quit, and it's usually after a long binge, guilt, or consequences. But if you're not prepared, the chances of it succeeding won't be that great. Setting a quit date should be monumental in a way, a specific day that you choose, a day when you know you have done all the work to prepare yourself for things like triggers and how to handle stress. For some people, this day will be a day for them to remember on their own, but if you feel you can tell someone, that's a good option as well. Not everyone has people that know about their addiction, so it's okay if that is you and you want to keep that information to yourself. So I usually recommend setting a quit date that's no longer than 30 days from now. You'll need time to set yourself up for success, but you don't want to drag it out for too long. Once you set that date, the less you can engage in porn, masturbation, or sex, the better. Some people feel like they want to do a huge binge right before their quit date, and that isn't a great idea. The more you engage, the worse you will feel, so try to taper down as best as you can leading up to your day. And once you have that date planned, mark it on your calendar, as that will be your day to celebrate from here on out. Okay, so let's move on to the next lecture, and I'm going to talk to you about how you can manage your triggers. See you there. Welcome to our next lecture. In this lecture, we're going to focus on triggers and how to manage them. So one thing that surprises a lot of people is that you can and probably will suffer from withdrawals after your quit date. Your body is going to be very confused at first, and you will experience changes. Everybody is different though. Some people experience withdrawal symptoms immediately after quitting, while others go through a honeymoon phase, which is like a state of euphoria, and then they'll experience withdrawal symptoms after. Some common symptoms of withdrawal are anxiety, low mood, sleep disturbances, headaches, fatigue, agitation, mood swings, and less common side effects are flu-like symptoms, body aches, and nausea. If you experience any of these symptoms, just know that it's your body's natural way of re-regulating itself and returning back to its baseline. It can be difficult sometimes to focus when experiencing withdrawal symptoms, so just be patient with yourself, and the symptoms should ease within about 30 days. After 30 days, you may experience something called post-acute withdrawal syndrome, which are the symptoms of a withdrawal after you have already fully withdrawn. And if that happens, just know that it's generally temporary and usually only lasts for a few minutes or a few hours at the most. And sometimes post-acute withdrawal syndrome can lead to a trigger. So if you know what's happening, you can stop a trigger before it starts. So let's talk about triggers. Triggers are common, and you'll experience more of them in the beginning. If you're prepared ahead of time, though, you will be able to work through them without relapsing. So if you are experiencing trigger or even post-acute withdrawal syndrome later in recovery, I want you to always remember to HALT, H-A-L-T. Most triggers happen when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. When you HALT, work through the acronym to find out if there's something that you can solve immediately. If you're hungry, grab a healthy snack. If you're angry, maybe some meditation or deep breathing. If you're lonely, can you call someone or chat in a support group? And if you're tired, can you take a nap? If after halting and trying to meet your basic needs, you are still feeling triggered, it may be time to try other things. When you are in the middle of a trigger, it's impossible to be creative and think of ways out of it, but if you're prepared and have a list of things that you can do and refer to it easily, you'll have a much better chance at getting through that trigger. So what I want you to do now is think of things that you can do if you have a trigger and write them down somewhere that you can easily access them at any time. Make sure this list includes a wide variety of things that range from easy activities to rather large activities. For example, taking 10 deep breaths might be something you put on your list, or going for a 5-mile run. You'll want to have things on your list that are physical, like taking a walk around the block or taking a cold shower. You want to have things that are helpful psychologically, like, for example, a 10-minute meditation from YouTube or writing in your journal. And you'll want to include things that involve other people, like calling a best friend or taking your kids to the park. Make sure you include things that you can do at home and things that you can do in public. Sometimes getting out of the house is best, while other times you can easily work through a trigger by doing something at home. So go ahead and start your list now, and I'll see you in our next lecture where we're going to talk about the importance of nutrition. See you there. Welcome back. So now that you have set a quit date or are thinking about when that will be, you need to start thinking about how you can help your body and mind adjust and get back to a healthy baseline. When I talk to my students, sometimes at first they are surprised to see so much focus on nutrition, fitness, and sleep. The reason for this is because the program isn't just about quitting sex, porn, or masturbation. It's a complete lifestyle change. The reasons you are addicted often stem from other areas in your life being out of balance. So think of it like this. If you stop sex, porn, or masturbation, but eat junk food high in sugar, irregular portion sizes, processed food with tons of chemicals, and so on, you are not going to feel better. Also, poor nutrition has been associated with bad mental health, such as low mood, anxious thoughts, and so on. So what I want you to do is take a look at your nutrition. I'm here to tell you that nobody has perfect nutrition, and the goal isn't to aim for perfection. But also, don't fool yourself either by thinking, oh, I eat healthy, so I'm going to skip this lecture. Don't do that. Everybody can improve somewhere. The biggest area that can make the biggest impact is cutting out sugar. Sugar is also highly addictive. It's a highly addictive substance that is not good for the body or the mind. So if you drink sugary drinks, including fruit juice, cut those out. See if you can start making small changes each week. Some people feel very overwhelmed at first, and that's normal. So what I suggest is trying some sort of nutrition plan. There are hundreds you can choose from online. Just do a bit of research, and if it sounds interesting to you, then go for it. Nutrition plans are a great way to get started and a good way to help change your behavior. They are not for everyone, but if you aren't sure how to start, then it might be a good way to go. Doing things like meal planning, making specific shopping lists, and eliminating junk food, like don't even buy it, or bring it into the home, not going shopping while hungry, and so on, can be ways to help get your nutrition on track. Make sure you are also focusing on portion control. Remember, portions should not be big. One portion is the size of your fist. So cut out unhealthy snacking, and if you do have a snack, make sure that it is healthy. As you progress and learn about nutrition, you can go further in adding things like specific vitamins, to try things out like cutting out meat or intermittent fasting. Everyone will be on a different scale and will start at different points, so don't try to go from 0 to 100 overnight. Small healthy changes each week can add up over time. Just do your research and commit to eating healthy portions, and you will see significant changes in your overall mood, which will help tremendously with your recovery. You got this, and I'll see you in the next lecture where we'll talk about fitness. Welcome back. So we talked in our last lecture about nutrition, which is very important when fighting an addiction. Now let's talk about fitness. People with porn, sex, or masturbation addiction are typically off balance in some way. When someone struggles with a sexual addiction, not only are the chemicals in their brain, like dopamine, serotonin, or norepinephrine, they're off balance, but the chemicals that their body naturally produces, like estrogen and testosterone, are also off balanced. While some people may need medication, most people can get their body back to a baseline by abstaining sexually for 30 days and improving their nutrition, fitness, and sleep. So having a good nutrition plan is very important and the first step to taking care of your body. Fitness is also important too, so there are two ways I want you to think about implementing fitness. 1, keep your body active and moving every day, and 2, implement intense fitness at least 3 times a week. So let's talk about the first one, keeping your body moving every day. This may sound like a no-brainer or easy to implement, but we live in a world where we spend most of our day on the computer. It's easy to lose track of time. How many times have you noticed that you haven't moved from your spot for 2 hours? So to do this, it's important to get up and stretch, walk around, run in place, do 10 jumping jacks, whatever it is that you want to do, but make sure you are doing it every hour for at least 2 to 5 minutes. When you're not working or on your computer, you can also incorporate daily walks, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, maybe add some yoga a few times per week, and so on. Just make a conscious effort to move, and the more you do it, the easier it will get. The second part of this is making sure that you incorporate some sort of intense fitness routine or program 3 times a week. If you're not sure where to start, again, you can try looking online for a fitness program. Most people do cardio or weights as that tends to be the most convenient, but others prefer things like cycling, hiking, swimming, boxing, whatever. It's important though that you enjoy it, or else you'll tend to burn out or get bored. Also, you could start with something and do that for a few months and then switch to something else. It doesn't matter what fitness you're doing as long as you do it. And then the last part is keeping track of your progress. This helps with motivation. If you can, get a fitness tracker, which will be helpful for sleep as well. And we'll talk about that in our next lecture. But by having a way to track your progress means you can see how you can improve over time. That's it for this lecture. I'll see you in our next lecture where we'll talk about sleep. Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to talk about sleep. So we talked earlier about how nutrition and fitness can help with dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, which are the chemicals in the brain, and also help maintain and balance healthy estrogen and testosterone levels. Now, getting good sleep is the last part of this. Sleep can affect all of these areas as well as regulate the human growth hormone, which is responsible for regulating your metabolism and glucose levels. So there are 2 areas of sleep that I want you to focus on. 1, making sure you are getting enough sleep, and 2, making sure that the sleep you are getting is high quality. So let's talk about getting enough sleep. A lot of people who struggle with a sexual addiction are up late engaging in their behavior, which results in not getting enough sleep to function at the best of their ability the next day. So you know your body best and how much sleep you require to feel good and energized the next day. For some of you, that may be 6 to 7 hours of sleep, and for others, it may be 9 to 10. Most people are somewhere in the middle at around 8 to 9 hours of sleep. So what you need to do is figure out a sleep goal. If you're not sure where to start with 8 hours and then work backwards. What time do you need to wake up every day? That will give you a bedtime. Now, a bedtime is the time that you actually fall asleep, so you'll need to be in bed quite a bit earlier in order to ensure you are actually sleeping at that time. So let's say you have a sleep goal of 8 hours and you wake up at 6 a.m. every day. You'll need to be asleep by 10 p.m., which means you'll need to start winding down around 9 p.m. Reduce your screen time before bed, turn down the lights, and so on. If you struggle with this, it will be difficult at first, but like everything else we've talked about, it will take consistency. If after 30 days of good nutrition, fitness, and trying to get to sleep on time, you are still having a hard time falling asleep, you can talk to your doctor. They may be able to help by checking to make sure all of your levels are okay, or may even refer you to a sleep doctor. But give it 30 days, and most sleep issues will resolve during that time. And then the next part of this is getting good, high-quality sleep. This means going to bed and sleeping and staying asleep. If you find yourself waking up multiple times per night, see what you can do to help eliminate those wakings. For example, you'll want to cut out caffeine by 2 or 3 p.m. every day, and make sure your sleep space is comfortable. Is it the right temperature? Most people sleep better in cooler environments. Is the lighting dark enough? If you're waking up to urinate, maybe stop drinking water a few hours before bed. Are you winding down before bed? Maybe try things like yoga or turning off the TV. It's especially important to stay away from your computer or phone before bed. All of those things can help with increasing your sleep quality. And last, if you have a fitness tracker, many of them also have sleep trackers as well, which is really helpful so you can see where you can do better and how you can increase or decrease in sleep as needed. That's it for this lecture. I'll see you in our next lecture where we're going to talk about mental health. Welcome back. So now we've talked about all things you can do to take care of your physical health, which is important. But what's also important is taking care of your psychological health as well. When taking care of your psychological health, you are focusing on your mental health, the way that you see the world or your worldview, and knowing how to live with intention. For this lecture, we're going to talk about your mental health. So first I want to talk to you about the chicken or the egg theory. When it comes to addiction and mental health, there's this theory called the chicken or the egg. Oftentimes we don't know what came first, but sometimes you can know this by just thinking back to how things were before you struggled with an addiction. So what's the theory? The theory goes like this. Do you struggle with your mental health because of your addiction? Or did you turn to sex, masturbation, or porn because you were struggling with your mental health? If the answer to this is that your mental health is struggling because of your addiction, then by tackling the addiction, your mental health should improve. If you were struggling with your mental health before your addiction, then it's going to be important that you get treatment for your mental health, or you'll consistently be living in this vicious cycle where you feel bad because of your mental health, and the only way to feel better is to partake in your sexual addiction. Quitting sex, porn, or masturbation won't fix your mental health struggles if they already existed prior to the addiction. Now, for some people, they're unsure, and that's okay if you don't know. If you don't know, I recommend the 30-day test. For 30 days, abstain from sex, porn, or masturbation while working on this program and focusing on your physical, psychological, and social health. And if things don't improve, then you'll know at that point you'll need to talk to a mental health professional. If they do improve, then you'll know things will get better as you progress through your recovery. However, if you don't think you need to talk to someone, I usually recommend keeping an open mind and exploring the possibility of talking to a mental health professional. Sometimes counseling and therapy can really be helpful. And with all that being said, whether or not you're struggling with your mental health, it's important to nurture your mental health every day. Make sure you're taking some time out for self-care and really take care of your mind. Things like meditation and yoga can really be helpful, as well as reminding yourself that you are strong and that by being here and working through this shows a lot of courage. Taking care of your mind is as equally as important as taking care of your body. That's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next lecture where we're going to talk about your worldview. Welcome back. In this section, sticking with working on your psychological health, I want to talk to you about your worldview. Your worldview is how you perceive the world, the way you live your life, your point of view, your philosophy, your values, your emotions, your ethics. The reason this is important is that what you see and do is not how everyone else sees and views things. Everyone has their own unique worldview, and you need to understand that and figure out how to embrace your worldview to benefit your situation. For example, you may view sex, porn, or masturbation as problematic as it's affected your life negatively, but your neighbor may view sex, porn, or masturbation as a way to have fun and embrace sexuality. Just because they see it that way doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means it hasn't affected them in the same way that it's affected you. So as you work through this, you will run across people in real life and on the internet who are going to have vastly different opinions on this topic. That doesn't mean their opinions are wrong or you should ignore them, but you will need to take some time to reflect on your values and ethics. What kind of person do you want to be? And how has this addiction impacted that? Is it holding you back? Spirituality and religion are big influences in a person's worldview. A lot of people turn to their religion for support or embrace spirituality. Spirituality is not the same thing as religion, so just remember that. You can be both spiritual and religious, or you can be spiritual without religion. It's your choice. Reflection can be obtained through actions like journaling, meditation, or just being still and living in the moment. It's important for you to come up with your own unique values and discover what is important to you, and then begin to live your life based on your own rule book. So I encourage you to take time each day. It can be as little as 5 minutes per day, or some people prefer longer sessions of up to an hour, to get to know your own self. And from this moment forward, making sure your actions come from what you are and who you want to be. It's a process, and you will grow as time goes on and as you are able to increase the amount of time you spend on self-discovery. That's it for this lecture. Next up, we're going to talk about how to live intentionally. See you there. Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to wrap up the theme of psychological health by talking about how important it is to live intentionally. Living intentionally is not as easy as it sounds. We spend so much of our time just running through the motions of life that we forget how to live and be present in the moment. Like right now, I want to know, are you listening and hearing what I'm saying, or has your mind wandered off and you're thinking about something else? If your mind has wandered off, that's perfectly normal. Most people don't know what it means to live in the moment or even how to do it. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about why this is so important when struggling with a sexual addiction, and I will give you some tips on how to accomplish this. So first, this is really important to learn how to do, because if you are on autopilot for most of the day, then chances are you will resort to some old habits. Triggers and relapses happen mostly when people are unaware that they are happening. So let me give you two scenarios. Okay, scenario number one, your neighbor Bob was late to work today. He was stuck in traffic, and when he got to work, his boss wrote him up. He had multiple things at work happen that caused him to be extra stressed. He didn't get a lunch break, only to fight traffic and get home. When he got home, he grabbed some food and sat down on his computer, opened up some porn, and masturbated for 30 minutes to relieve stress. Then he took his dog for a walk, watched TV until he went to bed. He woke up the next day with no consequences and went to work, and things were normal. Now let's take that same situation for someone who has a sexual addiction. Let's use the same situation: stuck in traffic, being written up, missed lunch, and so on. For someone who struggles with a sex addiction, it might go like this. On the way home, they call 3 girls to see if they want to hook up, and none of them are answering their phone. This only makes the situation worse, so they get home, immediately open their computer, watch porn for a few hours, spend some money on cam girls, continue to masturbate, call the girls back again, begging for sex, only for them to get even more annoyed, and now it's 10 p.m. on a Monday night, and before you know it, it's 1 a.m., hours have been wasted, money has been spent, and the whole thing was a blur, and the cycle happens again and again. When you struggle with a sexual addiction, it's important to never let your guard down, to live each moment with intention. So let's take that same situation again. If you struggle with a sexual addiction, the worst thing you can do after work is turn your brain off. Every moment from the time you leave work must be done with intention. So how are you going to work through your stress that doesn't involve sex, porn, or masturbation? So on your way home in that same situation, you would focus on the drive home and getting home safely. From there on, review your evening in your head. What do you want to do to de-stress? And what do you want to accomplish? Perhaps you are too stressed to cook a healthy meal from scratch, so you order a healthy meal for takeout or delivery. Maybe going for a long walk while listening to some good music. And then taking care of your home, cleaning up, watching your favorite Netflix series, until you know that it's time for bed. Take some time before bed to journal or meditate, and then you will feel ready to accomplish the next day. While moving through the motions, you are simultaneously living in the moment while strategically planning your next move so that you are not in any way moving through those motions unconsciously. So, a good way to live with intention, especially in the first 30 days, is to make a schedule and follow it every day, down to the minute, including weekends. I found that a lot of my students have a schedule from Monday through Friday, but don't include weekends, which is just as important, if not more important. Make sure that you schedule some downtime, and it's okay to have boring time, but what are you going to do so that you don't get triggered? Watch a movie, take a short nap, read a book. Then the next thing you can do is practice learning how to bring your thoughts and mind back into the present moment. If you find yourself stressing about the past or worrying about the future, take 3 deep breaths and focus on this present moment. So that's it for this lecture, and that's it for the topic of psychological health. Next up, we're going to focus on your social circles, which includes how to navigate family, friends, and professional relationships. I'll see you there. Hi everyone, welcome back. In the next 3 lectures, we're going to focus on relationships, family, friends, and professional. In this lecture, we're going to start with family. When it comes to family, it's important to prioritize relationships that you know will help you with your overall journey. Now, I know that most people who struggle with a sexual addiction tend to want to keep their addiction to themselves. Sometimes, though, sexual addictions can make an impact on family relationships, especially if you have a partner. So let's start there. If you are in a committed relationship, chances are your addiction has made an impact on that relationship. Now is the time to analyze your relationship to see if it's worth repairing. For some people, the damage is done and there's no chance of repairing the relationship, and if that's you, it's best for your recovery and everyone involved to walk away. For example, I had a student who was struggling with sex addiction. He was married, had 2 kids, but was always cheating on his wife to the point where she told him there was nothing he could do to make things right. In situations like that, the best thing you can do is walk away from the relationship and focus on making the relationship stronger, if that makes sense. The wife is burned, so it's best to give her space, but he still had 2 children to be a father to. So while he was walking away from the relationship, he was focusing on his recovery, his children, and making sure things were okay between him and his wife for the sake of the kids. On the flip side, I had another student who was addicted to porn. He would watch porn but neglected his partner and suffered sexually with erectile dysfunction disorder. He was able to have a long conversation with his partner about his recovery and his commitment to their relationship, quit porn, and eventually that helped him be able to refocus on the relationship, and the relationship got better. You have to make the decision for yourself on whether or not it's best to stay or go, but once you make that decision, stick with it, and either way, make sure you are doing what you can to ensure a strong recovery. Now, when it comes to other family members that aren't your partner, it will be up to you as to how much information you're willing to share with them about your addiction, if any at all. But you should analyze your family relationships and make sure that you're focusing on strong, healthy relationships and distancing yourself from toxic family members. I've had a few students say they wanted to focus on their family relationships, and once they started their recovery, their family members would make comments on how different they are, how much happier they seem. Okay, so go ahead and have a think about how you want your family relationships to be and start making changes now so that you can ensure a strong future. Welcome back to our next lecture. Continuing with relationships, we're now going to talk about friends. Now, this can be a sticky subject, but sometimes friends are involved. If you have any friends who trigger you, such as friends with benefits or friends who are constantly talking about sex or porn, then it might be a good idea to distance yourself from them while you focus on yourself. Like family, you should be analyzing your friendships. If you have toxic friends related or unrelated to your addiction, now is a good time to step away. While you are focusing on yourself, you don't need that sort of negativity in your life. Just remember, nothing ever has to be forever, so even if you walk away now, doesn't mean you can't pick up a friendship later on down the road. People do change, but for now, you need to make sure that you are staying true to yourself, and you don't need anyone who is going to jeopardize your recovery. As you work through this program, you might realize that you have friends that you've neglected or friends that you want to make sure you stay close with. You can start now by repairing those relationships. As your brain begins its transition back to its baseline, you will have more brain space to be able to see things clearly. And if you have friendships that you want to repair, go for it. Next up, we're going to talk about professional relationships. See you there. Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our last lecture that focuses on relationships. And with that being said, I want to talk to you now about your professional relationships. Think of your social health like this entire program. If one area is out of sync, it will be that much harder to fully invest in yourself and your recovery. So yes, you do need to focus on family and friends, but don't forget about your professional relationships. One thing I know is that most people who struggle with a sexual addiction when it comes to work feel as though they are living a double life. One that they have at work and who they present themselves to be, and one outside of work. Putting on a front, though, can be exhausting. It's like you're always trying to be someone you're not. But what if you suddenly didn't have to try so hard and you start to begin to have passion about your work and your relationships? That's what has happened with students who have taken my courses. They naturally start to perform better at work, which resulted in having better professional relationships. A lot of my students didn't realize how much they were neglecting their work until they started to work through everything and then started to see how much more they could be giving to balance things out. For example, one student told me that at the office or at conferences, they were always fantasizing about who they could have sex with. And another student told me that they would decline work functions to go home and watch porn. Now that you're working on yourself, you can focus on those you work with. And like family, students have told me that their coworkers can often see improvement in their mood and their effort at work. So make sure you're taking some time to focus on family, friends, and professional relationships to keep everything in sync. That's it for this lecture. I'll see you in the next one. That's it for this section. We talked about the Sobriety Success Method, which takes a holistic approach. We talked about addiction-specific topics like managing triggers and setting a quit date, and we also dug deep into topics that focus on your overall health, physically, psychologically, and socially. I hope you enjoyed this section. We have one more section to go where we'll talk more about how to manage your recovery starting with the first 30 days. See you there. Welcome to our next section. In this section, we're going to talk about what to expect in the first 30 days and beyond. We'll talk more about managing triggers, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, people, places, and things, relapse prevention, meditation, and long-term recovery. See you there. Welcome back. In this lecture, I want to talk to you about what to expect and things you can take action on in the first 30 days. So remember earlier when we talked about setting your quit date? So your first 30 days starts on that day. But remember, you should be decreasing your behavior leading up to your quit date, and your quit date should be sometime soon, so don't drag it out. So even though sex, porn, and masturbation isn't a substance you put into your body, you may still experience withdrawals. Everyone's withdrawals will be different, but just expect the first few days could potentially be a bit rough. One thing is that after your withdrawal, you may continue to get withdrawal symptoms for up to a year after you quit. This is something called post-acute withdrawal syndrome. I know we talked about this earlier, but now that we're almost done with the course, I just wanted to remind you that this could happen again. So if it does happen, remember to halt and think about whether or not you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and do what you can to tend to your basic needs. The biggest concern about pause is making sure that it doesn't turn into a trigger, but if it does, you know what to do to manage those triggers. Remember earlier we talked about making a list of things you can do. If you haven't made that list yet, please do so now. Make sure you have a variety of indoor and outdoor activities you can partake in so that there will always be something you can pick from. Believe it or not, there is a small window before a trigger happens where your body will warn you that it's about to happen. These warning signs can range from anger, anxiety, muscle tension, and so on. The only way to be in tune with what your body's warning signs may be is to make sure that you write down in your journal every time you feel a trigger and what you were feeling in your body right before. Then you can look for patterns. For example, if right before a trigger you often feel tired, then that is a sign to make sure that you focus on getting more rest so that you can avoid more triggers. Another way to manage triggers is to stop and think about people, places, and things. We've all heard this in school growing up, so it's an easy phrase to remember. In order to prevent triggers, you will want to make sure, at least for 30 days, that you avoid people that trigger you, places that trigger you, and things that trigger you. So that means you will need to get rid of any paraphernalia. If there are sexual toys you have in your home, it's probably time that you got rid of them. Porn videos, if you want to install porn blockers on your computer and avoid looking at pictures online, that may be a trigger. This means that you might have to take a break from social media. And the last thing I want you to consider in the first 30 days is whether or not you're seeing yourself trading one addiction for another. This is something to really try to avoid, which is why the Sobriety Success Method helps you focus on all the areas in your life. If you give up sex but turn to alcohol, that won't help your situation at all. If you give up porn but turn to food, neither will that. Make sure you're staying balanced in all the areas of your life so that you can have the best possible chance at a full, healthy recovery. The short-term goal is to prevent a relapse. The longer you abstain, the easier it will be. The long-term goals are to focus on your whole self in all areas of your life. You got this. Welcome back. Meditation is a powerful tool you can use when fighting an addiction. Meditation has been shown to reduce triggers, stress, and it's an overall good way to connect more with yourself. The next lecture is a meditation I have created. I have other meditations as well, so if you enjoy this one, send me a message and I'll let you know how to access more. So for this next lecture, find a comfortable seat, relax, and enjoy. If we do not allow the natural love for ourselves to be expressed, love does not reveal its beauty very often throughout each day of our lives. Get into a nice, relaxing position, removing any distractions for the further duration of this session. Take the very first action in self-love right now. Your ability to breathe at will in all different kinds of ways. Our breath has been there literally our entire lives, changing as needed to the demand of exciting circumstances and following effortlessly when we are resting. Taking multiple full and deep breaths every day is proven to change our bodies and minds for the better. Take in 5 full and deep breaths, holding it for a moment at the top and naturally exhaling. 1. Inhale a nice and big breath, expanding your belly and lungs as much as you can. Hold it. And exhale gently with relief. 2. Inhaling fresh oxygen that will be supplied to your bloodstream, holding it to soak it in, and exhaling without any effort. 3. Inhale, feeling rejuvenated and invigorated by this breathing. Hold it and exhale easily. 4. Inhale, noticing how breathing fully comes naturally for you. Pausing to soak it in, and exhale any tension or worry. And 5, inhaling fully is an act of self-love. Pausing to feel this love, and exhale into complete relaxation. Let your breath flow at a pace without any effort from you. Good. By doing this, you are proving you are capable of self-love. Deep breathing increases the supply of oxygen to your brain and stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, sometimes referred to as the rest and digest system. By breathing deeply and often, you are commanding your body to rest, which relaxes and rejuvenates you. This is self-love in its simplest form that anyone can do at any time of the day. Now let's honor ourselves by relaxing the mind even further. Notice now how your thoughts are rising in your mind, one after the other. See them come and see them go. Some thoughts linger for some time, and some thoughts only come for a split second. If you can really focus, you will notice even smaller thoughts, such as describing the world around you or labeling the things in your surroundings. Let your hearing become super alert now, and try to focus on some sounds around you. Maybe you can hear the sound of your breath. Can you hear nature nearby? Or perhaps cars passing by? Or people talking with each other? Just go from sound to sound, focusing on only one at a time. Now stop focusing on any sound in particular, and just allow all of the noises around you to come in equally, and when you hear them, they almost act as tiny waves of relaxation, calming your mind. Good. Your mind relaxes when you activate your senses on command. Let's use the power of your amazing visualization abilities to induce self-love. Begin to imagine yourself full of abundance of self-love. See yourself now choosing healthy foods and cooking at home so you know all of the ingredients you are putting into your body. vividly see yourself eating well. When you eat well, see yourself enjoy these moments, and you feel the nutrition that these choices bring you. Imagine now you have a strong will to avoid junk foods and unhealthy drinks. See yourself in great detail confidently saying no to all these things. You feel very proud now when you avoid eating something unhealthy. Good. Eating healthy is an essential component of self-love. Another form of self-love is observing your mental chatter. In order to have great self-love, you must expand the good things you feel about yourself and challenge any negative thoughts as soon as they arise. So hear yourself saying, "When I fully love myself, I am able to fully love others." Deciding to love myself is a wonderful agreement. Each day, I allow my love for myself to grow more and more. I am worthy of love, and I honor the joy that comes with it. Deciding to love myself unconditionally, no matter what happens, feels wonderful. I deserve love and self-respect. My self-esteem grows along with my self-love. I love and accept everything about myself. I completely and always love myself. Today, I love myself even more than yesterday. Truly loving myself is easy for me. The more I love myself, the better my entire health. I love every moment of my existence. Every part of me that makes me who I am is encompassed with love. I have unconditional love within me that overflows in abundance to those around me. Great. Now gently opening your eyes, take a fresh breath and know that whenever you love yourself, you will find love. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that meditation and are able to use it as needed. There are other ways to get meditations as well, whether it's online or through an app, so I always encourage my students to give a few a try until they find some that work for them. In this lecture, I want to talk to you about long-term recovery. So after 30 days, you should start to feel better in all areas of your life, or at a minimum, start to see minor improvements. If you don't, you may need to see a professional. For example, if you're struggling with your nutrition, you should see a nutritionist. If you're struggling with your fitness, maybe a personal trainer. Or perhaps you're not sleeping well and need to see a sleep specialist. Remember also, it's really important to see a mental health professional if after 30 days you are not feeling well mentally. So one thing I like my students to know is that contrary to what a lot of addiction and recovery places tell you, you do not have to focus your entire life around recovery forever. For some, 30 days might be a sweet spot, and you may be ready to move on. For others, you may need to keep focusing strong on your recovery for a while longer. Your situation is unique to you, so don't feel like after 30 days, if you aren't feeling this miraculous change, that something is wrong. Just focus on progress. One thing I encourage everyone to do, if needed, is to find support groups either online or in person if they feel they need that extra support. All support groups are different, so often it's trial and error. But keep looking until you find one that's right for you. Another way to help your recovery, if you're feeling like you need a little more, is to get involved with advocacy. With porn and sex addiction, often my students become deeply involved with organizations that help victims of sex trafficking, or perhaps there are ways for you to get involved with human rights organizations that help create better porn laws. There are lots of ways that you can get involved if that's your thing, but don't feel pressured. It's just a thing for some. And last, if you are interested or think this may help, giving back to society is a good way to stay strong in your recovery. Giving back is helping those who have had similar struggles. You can give back by volunteering with organizations or just helping an individual person online. Again, no pressure, just if that's something that you think may help. A lot of people do get something from it and feel as though it makes the recovery stronger. Okay, and with that being said, that's a wrap for this lecture. That's it for this section. We talked about ways to take action in the first 30 days and beyond, and how to manage your long-term recovery. In the next lecture, we'll wrap up the course. See you there.
Congratulations on completing this course. You should be really proud of yourself for working through all of the lectures, all of the assignments and quizzes. I know this hasn't been an easy course, but the fact that you are here and you finished really shows how much strength and courage you have. You can always post in our Q&A section. You can reach out to me. Personally, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And we also have a closed Facebook group, so if you'd like to join that, just let me know and I'll send you the link. Congratulations again. Bye!
Hello everyone, welcome to the bonus lecture. I wanted to invite you to join the live rehab community. There are many ways you can follow us. Check us out on all the socials, but that's not all. I like to give my students who complete a full course special offers. For anyone who smokes, I want to give you my Quit Smoking Now course for free. All you need to do is complete this course and send me a message, and I'll send you a free coupon. Also, I'd like to offer any of my other courses to you for only $10, which is the lowest price I'm allowed to offer here at Udemy. Check out the link in the resource section for a list of all my courses and a link to sign up. Thanks so much.